now for a very long time. In the case of Real Madrid, for decades, many decades. And in the case of Barcelona, for the last 2 decades, the two greatest Spanish teams, the richest, the ones that played the most dazzling football, and the ones, of course, those clubs that won the most trophies and had the most great players. It's synonymous, the name Real Madrid, Barcelona, with great players, great occasions and big trophies. Sadly, football in Spain, in those two clubs in particular, is not what it used to be, and the results are beginning to show that in quite spectacular ways. We're joined now from Barcelona by Richard Fitzpatrick, who's an Irish journalist working and living in Barcelona, and who has informed us greatly about what's happening in Spanish football, which of course is hugely important for the rest of Europe for many, many reasons. Richard, thank you very much for joining us. I suppose I should start at the bottom. Last week, Real Madrid were at home to Sheriff Tiraspol, the Moldovan champions, and they lost 2-1 in the Bernabeu. It is almost impossible to believe, especially given that they'd actually equalised. And then Sheriff Tiraspol went ahead and scored a winning goal. Can you tell us about this and the effect of it on the Real Madrid fans and indeed on the whole of the Spanish game? Because I imagine it was something else.
Yeah, the sheriff came to town and laid down the law. There's been lots of jokes flying around the country, as you can imagine. People are saying it's the most embarrassing European defeat for Real Madrid, given the size of this club. Sheriff, that they were knocked out of the Europa League last year by Dundalk. They came through the qualifying stages of the Champions League to get their place. It was a 2-1 defeat. You rightly say, Real Madrid managed to equalise, but then they lost to a late goal, which was a cracking goal. It was a kind of half volley. There are kind of like mitigating circumstances. The keeper was inspired for Sheriff. Real Madrid did dominate the game for the 90 minutes. Florentino Perez, the president, has kind of dismissed it. He said, "Look, this is the problem I have with the existing Champions League. You have these, in his eyes, these." Nothing games, or it's impossible to get motivated for them. So he is positioning it as a kind of aberration. It's like the week or a few weeks before, 2 weeks before, Real Madrid did get a good 1-0 win away at the San Siro. So, I mean, they'll probably, they'll come through that group, and it will be a footnote, in their history, you would think. It kind of speaks to Real Madrid, or they're not firing on all cylinders at the moment. But I think it would be a mistake to draw any big conclusions from it.
Yes, and they lost away to Espanyol yesterday.
Yes,
one of the lesser Spanish teams. They lost 2-1 away. They're still top of the league, La Liga, on goal difference from Atletico Madrid, who look much stronger than they are, and Real Sociedad. The coach, Carlos Ancelotti, is one of the great revered football coaches, football men indeed, as a player. He was wonderful, and he's won the Champions League on numerous occasions, including, I believe, once with Real Madrid. He's gone back to Madrid because Zidane decided he'd had enough. Now, Ancelotti is a great football man. I think there's nobody that questions his pedigree. So things must be pretty bad with the club in general.
Yeah, it's very interesting. They're basically operating on a war footing with a war economy. It's been austerity for the last 2 or 3 years since they sold Cristiano Ronaldo in the summer, the last World Cup in 2018 for 100 million. They just banked that. They didn't spend it. Two summer transfer windows ago, for the first time in 40 years, they didn't buy a player. So they've been kind of husbandry they've been keeping their resources well. They introduced pay cuts for their players, two of them during the worst of the pandemic. They've offloaded players. They sold the likes of Rafael Varane this summer and Martin Odegaard to Arsenal.
Yes.
They've done well selling these players, Akraf and Sergio Reguilon the summer before for like 100 million.
And of course, Ramos left, went to PSG where he hasn't played yet.
Yeah.
But he left in a dispute over a pay cut. I think knowing Ramos, but he was a huge leader of that club on the pitch and on the training ground. He was a significant figure, wasn't he? He
was. But I wonder, I think it was. Let's see how things play out. But that was a shrewd business move, you could say. They got him his salary off the books. They brought in David Alaba from Bayern Munich.
He's a very good player.
Yeah, 7 years younger. He's got the legs in him for a good few seasons. So it just speaks to the kind of the ruthless or the business sense of their president Florentino Perez. Like last week, La Liga released the spending capacity for the clubs in La Liga, and it's staggering. Real Madrid's for this season is 740 million. Barca's, for example, in 7th place is 97 million. So by a factor of 7 or 8 less than Real Madrid. The La Liga finance expert praised Real Madrid for their, in quote unquote, their brilliant management of the pandemic, in managing the resources. And they've been building up a war chest as we saw, for Kylian Mbappe this season. And they tried to get him during the summer. So the future looks, they're in a relatively strong position now because they have been careful. But their squad is a mix of old players and very young players. So they're not at the strength they were 3 or 4 years ago.
And of course, the Spanish clubs would have suffered greatly with the absence, with empty stadiums during the pandemic and not having TV deals, anything like the Premier League. So it would have been, as it was in Italy, a severe blow not to fill the Bernabeu every week. And also, of course, Camp Nou every week.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the likes of Real Madrid, this is what Florentino would complain about, or the La Liga president. They can't compete against the likes of PSG, who have bottomless pockets.
Yeah, well, they're the Qatari government, so they've got as much as you need.
Yeah. It's extraordinary. There was when Man City played PSG last week, the figures released showed that PSG's salary base was 3 times the size of Man City's. Huge signing on bonus to Messi for joining. His salary on top of Neymar's and Mbappe's. All the other stars as well, Ramos, etc.
Yeah, at Barcelona, this is particularly sad in some ways. It almost, in some respects, is a self-inflicted wound by the suits at Barcelona. And Ronald Koeman, who is renowned for having scored a winning goal in a European Cup final for Barcelona from a free kick a long time ago, 92, I think it might have been.
Correct.
But is a respected coach, and he's left holding the baby. At the moment, I think they're 9th with a game in hand, but they've had a torrid time in the Champions League as well, haven't they? They're in a tough enough group with Bayern Munich and Benfica, and they're bottom of it.
I mean, it's amazing. The problem with Barcelona is just the hysteria around the club. We can come to Koeman and his fight at the moment with the president, Laporta.
Yeah.
But just briefly on you're correct. They're 9th. In the league table. They've a game in hand. It's very early doors in a league season, but the Champions League is very, very worrying for them. They played 2 games, no shot on target, 2 3-0 defeats against Bayern Munich and Benfica, as you say.
Yeah.
They will really struggle to get out of that group now. They'll have to win their next 3 games. Their last game is against Bayern Munich. but just the manner of their play would not inspire any confidence. And the problem, like they still have although they had to shed Messi, which is causing this hysteria and this crisis of confidence, and they also lost Griezmann during the summer. They still have a good squad in theory. It should be able to compete with the likes of Real Madrid and Atletico, but there's just a real uncertainty and nervousness around the club, and this problem at the top between Laporte, the president, and Koeman is completely undermining the team at the moment. What's happened is that the President Laporte came in March. He was newly elected after the previous president had to resign.
He'd been president before, hadn't he, during the glory years?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Barcelona's most successful president by trophy haul over, and he kind of rescued the club in 2003. And it's very interesting. It was a very similar crisis to the situation now. Back in 2000, they lost Figo. He was stolen from them by Real Madrid. They were mired in debt, the same kind of debt to income ratio that they have now. Huge similarities between the situations. But Laporta came in, he steadied the ship. He got lucky in signing Ronaldinho instead of David Beckham, and that led to a couple of Champions League trophy in 2006 and a few league titles. But so he's come back now in March, and he campaigned saying that he was going to keep Messi at the club, and he did a U-turn on that campaign pledge. And his problem with Koeman, the coach, is that Koeman isn't his man. Koeman was chosen by his predecessor, Bartomeu and Laporte are sworn enemies. So he hugely undermined Koeman at the end of the season. Barca had managed, chiefly down to Messi, to put themselves in a position to win the league title with 5 games to go in the league race. But they squandered that chance that Atletico won the league title. At the end of the season, Laporta said, Koeman said publicly, I'm going to give myself 15 days to find a replacement for Koeman. Let's see who's out there. He couldn't find that replacement, so he was stuck with Koeman. Yeah. Obviously, Koeman's authority from then on in the dressing room is, it's hugely compromised. And they've continued their spat, both of them issuing kind of statements publicly. There was an extraordinary situation then after the Benfica defeat on Wednesday night. The two of them flew back together on the plane, side by side, only there was the aisleway on the plane separating them. Not a word passed between them. Right. All the press reported on Thursday and Friday here in Spain, Koeman is gone. Atletico will be his last game. And then on Friday night, Laporta comes out and says that we're sticking by Koeman. He's going to stay as the coach. And what's happening is that there's an assembly of the members. Barca is a members-owned club, as we've spoken about, on October 17th to kind of address all the financial issues. So Koeman has a stay of execution for now, but his position is unsustainable.
Tell us about the new camp and the atmosphere post-Messi. A, can they fill the stadium? And B, given how loved, celebrated, revered, I suppose is the right word, Lionel Messi was, it must be strange to be in that stadium post-Lionel Messi.
Oh, it's dead. I've been at a couple of games now. The atmosphere was only at 40% capacity, but really? It's really dispiriting. Although the authorities now have allowed for full capacity. So at the Wanda Atletico Stadium on Saturday was full house. But it was interesting to watch the reaction to Messi's departure in the stadium. The first couple of games, the fans, a cohort of the fans were jeering Messi's name on the 10th minute. Some fans were applauding him and some were jeering him. But that chant now has changed to just add every 10-minute mark to mark Messi's number 10. Yeah. They just chant "fuck PSG." So they've so they've moved on a bit from that division, but it's completely decimated the club, having to sell or release your greatest player, arguably the greatest player in history. It's so dispiriting for the fans.
Yes, and of course Luis Suarez, who was shipped out rather ignominiously to Atletico Madrid, where he's just had a great season, scored a lot of goals, and Atletico won the league title. And Suarez was Messi's closest friend.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they really have shot themselves in the head, haven't they?
Absolutely. They were paying half his wages last season while he scored 21 goals in the league title race to deliver a league title to Atletico. His teammates at Atletico said he was the reason they won the league title. He was scoring goals that Diego Costa and Alvaro Morata the previous seasons couldn't score. And again, he's at it again this season. He's defying medical science. He scored on Saturday night, also provided an assist. It was funny. He ate doing a mobile phone call after he scored the goal. Koeman was up in the stands. It was a message to Koeman. He was banned from the sideline. Message to Koeman, about their previous telephone conversation the summer before when Koeman axed him in a 60-second call. So he's still got the bit between his teeth, Suarez. He completed his roulette wheel by scoring against Barca. He scored against all of La Liga's teams now.
I must say, Richard, like most people in football, I have always had the highest regard for Ronald Koeman as a footballer. And indeed, as a coach, he hasn't always been successful. He didn't do particularly well at Everton, for example, but he did well with the Netherlands. The national team improved them greatly. And as a man, he's always had been a dignified figure. And yet, his decision to march into the Camp Nou to, as we understand it, make it clear to Messi that he's the same as any other player, and then to boot out on a free transfer Lionel Messi's closest friend, who is anyway a top player. That approach seems to me to be, on the mental side, not very coherent.
Yeah, he has made his mistakes, Koeman, but he's in a very, very difficult situation. He made that phone call to Suarez a couple of days after being appointed. He was following the party line. The president said they wanted to get rid of Suarez. Like, if the argument at the top was, as regards Suarez, was one, that he was a troublemaker, and two, that he wasn't a top player for European nights anymore. He hadn't scored away in the Champions League. He still hasn't since I think it's 2015. So, but he's a guy that will domestically is still doing it, So
course,
it was short-sighted, and especially to give in to a direct rival. So it was a difficult situation. His treatment of Messi, that was required, somebody to stand up to Messi and the heavyweights in the dressing room, and only a guy with the kind of mythical status that Koeman has at the club could do something like that.
Okay. Scoring a winner in the Champions League in the European Cup isn't a myth.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. I couldn't resist that. No, I thought it was a massive blunder. That he probably will. Well, he certainly will pay with his job. I wonder about Piqué and there's talk now that they want Xavi back. And I saw last week that Iniesta, who I think is in China, but one of the great trio, Xavi, Messi, Iniesta, he's expressed an interest in going back to Barca as well. And it is a club, isn't it? As we know, going back as far as Johan Cruyff, that very much welcomes back warmly someone of Iniesta, Xavi, Cruyff, whoever it was. If once, and even Koeman, it's applied to. It's a club that is very much aware of people who've left still being part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, talk about mythology the club is founded on, particularly in recent history, that amazing generation of homegrown players, Xavi, Iniesta and Messi being the holy trinity.
Yes.
But I suppose you would have to tread cautiously. Like Iniesta, I couldn't imagine him as a head coach, given his kind of introverted personality, but who knows? But he would come back, you'd imagine, and work in the youth academy, that kind of role.
Yes.
Xavi is an obvious front runner to replace Koeman.
Yes.
Of
course, he was the captain. He was a leader in that great Barca team.
Absolutely, yeah, and a different personality to Iniesta, a lot more outgoing and outspoken. But it's a very, very difficult situation at the club. Barca, they don't have the money to hire a top coach. Like they don't have the money to hire an Antonio Conte, for example. There's only a few kind of coaches now in the middle of the season who are available to get. They still haven't paid off Kiki Setien or Ernesto Valverde, who they fired. They'll have to pay 12 million to get rid of Koeman. According to La Liga, they only have 4 million available to pay for a new coach. I mean, they could get around that by paying La Liga penalty clauses. But as regards Xavi, he's the front runner, but he doesn't. Laporte looked at him during the summer, and the uncertainty around Xavi is that he's inexperienced. He's only been managing out in Qatar. He also was aligned with Laporta's rival in the presidential race, Victor Font.
Right.
He'd also have to deal with ex-teammates, Piqué being a big problem. It wouldn't be an ideal situation to come in. So they might try and get somebody to a replacement who would last until the end of the season.
Just to look at this through a slightly wider lens, Richard, to the city of Barcelona, how much does this collapse really of their great football team mean? Is it something they're sort of blasé about and so what, or given that, immediately if you mention the word Barcelona, you think of their great team and their great players. How much does that mean to the city? I read a very good book which is published recently, Barca, and it suggested that this was very much a club that the city loved and respected and were proud of.
Oh my God, the people are despondent. There's just a natural melancholy anyway in the club and in the city. The club is named Barcelona. It was specifically named in 1899 after the city. Espanyol is obviously called after Spain.
Yes.
It's a huge part of the Catalan identity, this region in the northeast corner of Spain, 7 or 8 million people.
Yes.
They're absolutely despondent at the situation now. So much of their lives is built around the success of this club. And like people, into their middle ages here in Barcelona, they only know success.
Yes.
They've been just since Cruyff arrived in 88, and they had that glorious dream team in the early 90s, mid 90s. And then you had Rondino, Xavi, Messi, for the last 15 years, they've been dominating in Spain, 4 European Cups. So to see the situation now, how embarrassing it is that they're the laughingstock of Europe. They had on the last day of the transfer window, they had to shift Griezmann out. They needed to get him off their wage bill. They brought in Luke de Jong, a Sevilla reject, a guy who couldn't make it at Newcastle United, as a replacement striker. They're hanging their heads in shame. And the club is inherently kind of unstable because of its democratic makeup. The club isn't ruled by an oligarch, or that the members elect a president, but they don't have this kind of situation they have at Real Madrid, a similar structure, whereas at Real Madrid there's a benign dictator in charge. He rules the roost. He's, as we've discussed, he managed the pandemic really well, the finances of the club. In Barcelona, the club is immersed in just hysteria, and that this makes for very short-term thinking. You have the situation with Laporta and Koeman at war with each other in public. So it's huge volatility.
Just a final question. I'd also like to ask you, so many people in this country and indeed elsewhere where they listen to the Stand in England, the UK, are desperate to get to Spain to get some sun. What is the COVID situation like now, Richard, particularly on the Costa? There's still quite a lot along or down in the Costas. I mean, in southern Spain, there is a coast, of course, a beautiful coast, close to Barcelona. What is the situation with COVID now?
Yeah, the situation is good. Like the 14-day incidence rate is down to its lowest since July 2020. The vaccine rollout was a huge success here. In global terms, they're at kind of 79% of the adult population above the kind of 12-year-olds. Who have all got it. There wasn't a huge anti-vax movement here, not as high, say, as in France, but it's not ideal. Like a lot of the 20 to 40-year-olds haven't got the vaccine.
Really?
There's about a 11% drop there, yeah. So it's just out of laziness, or this is what the experts are saying, out of laziness, disinterest.
What about restrictions on people going to restaurants and being indoors? Are those restrictions severe, or have they been lifted?
No, they're nearly all lifted now. This weekend, like we mentioned, the football stadiums are back at full capacity. I know in Barcelona, which would be more strict on the restrictions than Madrid, for example, they're going to open the nightclubs soon with a COVID passport. If you could prove you've had the vaccine, or you've and in Madrid, the president of the Madrid community there, Ayuso, said that we're one step away now from life as it was as regards restrictions and stuff before the pandemic. So for people coming to the country, they would, you'll see a lot of people still wear the masks outdoors, just walking on the streets and that. But once you have the digital certificate for traveling, it's quite straightforward. You don't need to get the PCR tests at the airport. And Spain is a fantastic country because you can live on the streets. If you're feeling uncomfortable about eating indoors, you can just eat out on the pavement. I mean, just personally, I've only been indoors eating or drinking, a handful of times over the last 18 months because you don't have to do it. So
we envy you every day, Richard.
Yeah. So what I would say to people is just the travel thing. That would be the nervous aspect maybe, but once you get here, you can be careful and pick and choose. And the weather, especially down in the south of Spain, is still it's beautiful until November. Even in Catalonia in the north, it's lovely. Mild weather at this time of year.
Okay, this podcast was sponsored by the Spanish Tourists Board. Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us from Barcelona. And we're very grateful to Richard, of course, as always.